Before you watch this chilling tale, lock your doors and check your windows. What would you do if you heard a knock at midnight, but no one was there? Don't look outside. Some things are better left unseen. The wind howled outside the old wooden cabin, tucked deep in the pine forest of northern Maine. It was the kind of night where the moon hid behind thick clouds, and the only light came from the flickering fireplace inside. Sarah, a 28-year-old writer seeking solitude to finish a novel, sat curled up on the couch with her laptop. The cabin was her escape from the city, a place to focus, but tonight something felt off. A sharp knock echoed from the front door. Sarah froze, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. The clock on the wall read 11:58 p.m. Who could be out here, miles from the nearest town? She waited, heart pounding, hoping it was just a branch hitting the door in the storm. Knock, knock, knock. The sound was deliberate, rhythmic. Not the wind, not a branch. Someone, or something, was out there. Who's there? Sarah called, her voice trembling. Silence. She grabbed the fireplace poker and crept toward the door, her bare feet cold against the wooden floor. The cabin was small, just a living room, a kitchenette, and a bedroom loft upstairs. There was nowhere to hide if someone broke in. She pressed her ear against the door, listening. Nothing, just the wind. Then a whisper, so faint she wasn't sure she heard it. Let me in. Sarah stumbled back, her grip tightening on the poker. Who's out there? She shouted, her voice cracking. No response. She peered through the peephole, but the porch was empty, shrouded in darkness. The single bulb outside flickered, casting long shadows across the snow-dusted ground. She flicked on every light in the cabin, her breath shallow. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe it was nothing. But then she heard it again. A low, guttural whisper from just beyond the door. Sarah, let me in. Her blood ran cold. She hadn't told anyone her name, not the locals in town, not even the old man who rented her the cabin. She backed away, clutching the poker like a lifeline. The phone line was dead, common in these remote parts during storms, and her cell had no signal. She was alone, or so she thought. As the night wore on, the knocks grew louder, more insistent. They came in patterns. 3 quick raps, a pause, then 2 slow ones. Sarah barricaded the door with a chair, but the whispers didn't stop. They seemed to come from everywhere now, seeping through the walls, the windows, even the floorboards. Sarah, I'm cold. Let me in. She didn't sleep that night. By morning, the knocks stopped, but the silence was worse. She found scratches on the outside of the door, deep, jagged marks that hadn't been there yesterday. They weren't animal scratches. They were too precise, too human. Sarah decided to investigate the cabin's history. The old man in town, Mr. Harrow, had warned her it was quirky, but he hadn't elaborated. She drove to the local library, a crumbling building with flickering fluorescent lights. The librarian, a wiry woman named Agnes, gave her a strange look when she asked about the cabin. "You're staying at the old Whittaker place?" Agnes asked, her voice low. "Folks don't stay there long." "Why not?" Sarah pressed. Agnes hesitated, then handed her a dusty file. "Read it yourself, but don't say I didn't warn you." The file contained newspaper clippings from the 1970s. A family, John and Mary Whittaker and their daughter, Emily, had lived in the cabin. One winter, they vanished. No bodies, no signs of a struggle, just gone. Locals whispered about a curse, about something in the woods that called to people. The last clipping mentioned a hiker who stayed in the cabin in 1983. He was found wandering the forest, babbling about the thing outside, before he disappeared too. Sarah's stomach churned. She returned to the cabin, determined to pack up and leave. But as night fell, the knocks returned. This time they weren't at the door. They were coming from the walls. Sarah stood frozen in the living room, the poker trembling in her hands. The knocks were louder now, echoing from the wooden walls like a heartbeat. Thump, thump, thump. They moved, circling the cabin, as if whatever was out there was inside now, crawling through the structure itself. "Stop it!" she screamed, her voice swallowed by the storm outside. The wind howled louder, almost mocking her. She grabbed a flashlight and checked every inch of the cabin. The windows were locked, the door still barricaded, but the knocks kept coming, faster now, relentless. She climbed to the loft, hoping to find a loose pipe or an animal trapped in the walls. Instead, she found something worse. Scratched into the underside of the loft's wooden beams were words, "I see you, I'm close." Sarah's knees buckled. The scratches were fresh, the wood shavings still clinging to the beams. Someone, or something, had been here while she was downstairs. She scrambled down the ladder, her flashlight beam shaking. The knocks stopped, replaced by a new sound, scratching, like nails dragging across wood. She followed the sound to the kitchenette, where the floorboards creaked under her weight. The scratching was coming from below. Against her better judgment, she pried up a loose board with the poker. Beneath it was a crawl space, barely a foot high, shrouded in darkness. Her flashlight caught something, a glint of metal. She reached in and pulled out a locket, tarnished and cold. Inside was a photo of a young girl with pale eyes and dark hair. The inscription read, "Emily, 1972. Sarah's heart raced. Emily Whittaker, the girl who vanished with her family. She dropped the locket, backing away as the scratching grew louder. The air in the cabin felt heavy, like it was pressing down on her. Then she heard it, a child's voice, soft and sing-song. "Sarah, come play with me." She ran to the door, yanking the chair away, but it wouldn't open. The lock was jammed, the handle frozen. The windows wouldn't budge either. She was trapped. The power flickered, then went out. The only light came from her flashlight and the dying embers in the fireplace. In the darkness, she saw something move, a shadow, too tall, too thin, darting across the room. She swung the poker wildly, hitting nothing but air. "Who are you?" she screamed. "What do you want?" The child's voice answered, closer now. "I want you to stay." Sarah spent the night huddled in the loft, clutching the poker, listening to the scratching and whispers. By morning, the door was unlocked, as if nothing had happened. She grabbed her keys and drove to town, desperate for answers. At the library, Agnes was waiting. "You saw her, didn't you?" Agnes said, her eyes narrowing. "Emily?" Sarah nodded, her throat dry. "What is she?" Agnes sighed. "Not a she, not anymore. Something took the Whittakers that winter. Something old. It wears their faces, uses their voices. It wants to be let in." "Why me?" Sarah whispered. "Because you're alone," Agnes said. "It likes the lonely ones." Sarah didn't return to the cabin that day. She checked into a motel in town, but the whispers followed her. They were in her dreams now, calling her name, begging her to come back. She found the locket in her pocket, though she was certain she'd left it in the cabin. That night, the knocks came to the motel door. Sarah woke to the sound of knocking at the motel door. It was 3:00 a.m., and the room was freezing. She didn't move, didn't breathe. The knocks were soft at first, then louder, more desperate. She clutched the locket, her only clue, and whispered, "Go away." The knocking stopped. But then she saw it, a face at the window. It was a girl, maybe 10 years old, with pale eyes and dark hair. Emily. Her lips didn't move, but Sarah heard her voice. "You can't run, Sarah. I'm already here." Sarah screamed, throwing the locket across the room. The face vanished, but the air grew colder, heavier. She called the front desk, but the line was dead. She tried her cell. No signal. The motel, like the cabin, felt like a trap. She grabbed her car keys and fled, driving back to the cabin despite every instinct screaming against it. She needed answers, and the cabin was the only place she'd find them. When she arrived, the door was wide open, though she'd locked it before leaving. Inside, the furniture was rearranged, the chairs stacked in a pyramid in the center of the room. "Who's doing this?" she shouted, her voice echoing. The child's voice answered from the loft. "Me." Sarah climbed the ladder, poker in hand. The loft was empty, but the words scratched into the beams had changed. You're mine now. She tore through the cabin, searching for anything that could explain what was happening. In the crawl space, she found more relics of the Whitakers. A diary, a child's drawing, a rusted knife. The diary was Emily's, filled with childish scrawl about the friend in the woods, who promised to keep her safe. The last entry read, "He's here. He's not my friend." Sarah realized she wasn't dealing with Emily, or not just Emily. Something else was using her, wearing her face like a mask. She burned the diary in the fireplace, hoping to break whatever hold it had. The flames roared, but the whispers only grew louder. "You can't burn me." The voice said, no longer a child's. It was deep, guttural, wrong. Sarah called Agnes, who arrived with a box of old books and charms. "It's a Wendigo," Agnes said, "a spirit of hunger. It takes people, uses their forms to lure others. You've been marked." "How do I stop it?" Sarah asked. "You don't," Agnes said. "You run, or you fight." Sarah chose to fight. She and Agnes set up a circle of salt and iron around the cabin, chanting words from one of Agnes's books. The air grew thick, the temperature plummeting. The Wendigo's voice roared, shaking the walls. "You can't keep me out." The windows shattered. The face appeared again, Emily's, but twisted, her eyes black voids. Sarah swung the poker, but it passed through the figure like smoke. Agnes screamed, clutching a charm as the Wendigo lunged. When Sarah woke, Agnes was gone. The salt circle was broken, and the locket was back in her hand. Sarah was alone again, but the Wendigo was closer now. She could feel it, a weight in her chest, a hunger that wasn't hers. The cabin was no longer safe, but neither was anywhere else. The Wendigo had followed her to the motel, to her dreams. It was inside her now, whispering her fears, her doubts. She found Agnes's book, left behind in the chaos. It described the Wendigo as a spirit born of starvation and despair, a predator that fed on loneliness. To kill it, you had to face it in its true form, but no one knew what that was. The book warned, "It will show you what you fear most." Sarah's fear was being alone. She'd come to the cabin to escape her empty apartment, her failed relationships, her writer's block. The Wendigo knew that. It used Emily's face because it was innocent, disarming, but now it was changing. That night, the knocks came from inside her head. She saw visions, her parents, her ex, her childhood dog, all with black eyes, all begging her to let them in. She clutched the locket, the only thing grounding her to reality. She realized it wasn't just a keepsake. It was a tether, a piece of Emily the Wendigo couldn't fully consume. Sarah decided to confront the Wendigo. She drove into the forest, following a path described in Emily's diary. It led to a clearing where the trees were twisted, their branches forming unnatural shapes. In the center was a stone altar, covered in old bloodstains. She placed the locket on the altar and called out, "Show yourself." The air grew still. The Wendigo appeared, not as Emily, but as Sarah herself. It was her face, her body, but wrong, gaunt, with hollow eyes and jagged teeth. "You can't kill me," it said. "I'm you." Sarah swung the poker, but the Wendigo was faster. It pinned her to the ground, its breath cold and rancid. "Join me." It whispered, "Be free." Sarah fought back, driven by rage and fear. She grabbed the locket and pressed it against the Wendigo's chest. It screamed, a sound that shook the forest. The locket burned, glowing red, and the Wendigo recoiled. Sarah ran, clutching the locket, but the Wendigo pursued her, its form shifting. Emily, Agnes, her own face. The forest seemed to bend around her, the trees closing in. She stumbled back to the cabin, locking herself inside, but the Wendigo was already there. The cabin was a battlefield. The Wendigo was everywhere, its voice in her head, its face in the shadows. Sarah knew she couldn't run anymore. The locket was her only weapon, but it wasn't enough. She needed to understand why the Wendigo wanted her. She found a hidden compartment in the crawl space, containing a letter from John Whittaker. It described how he'd summoned the Wendigo, desperate to save his family during a brutal winter. He'd made a deal, offering himself to the spirit, but it took Emily instead, and then Mary, and then him. The locket was Emily's, imbued with a protection charm that kept the Wendigo from fully claiming her soul. Sarah realized the Wendigo needed her to break the charm. It couldn't take her until she gave in, until she let it in. She clutched the locket, refusing to surrender. The Wendigo's attacks grew relentless. It shattered the windows, tore through the walls. Sarah fought back with salt, iron, and the locket, but she was weakening. Her body was starving, her mind fraying. The Wendigo was winning. In a final act of defiance, Sarah burned the locket in the fireplace. The Wendigo screamed, its form collapsing into a mass of shadows and teeth. She ran into the forest, the cabin collapsing behind her. The Wendigo pursued, but it was weaker now, its tether to the locket gone. Sarah reached the altar again. She smeared her blood on the stone, chanting the words from Agnes's book. The Wendigo appeared, its true form revealed, a towering, emaciated creature with antlers and glowing eyes. It lunged, but Sarah stood her ground, driving the poker through its heart. The Wendigo dissolved, its scream fading into the wind. The forest was silent. Sarah collapsed, exhausted but alive. She left the cabin's ruins behind, driving out of the forest as dawn broke. The locket was gone, the Wendigo destroyed. But as she glanced in her rearview mirror, she saw a shadow move in the trees. And then a faint knock. Epilogue. Sarah never returned to the cabin. She published her novel, a horror story about a woman haunted by a spirit in the woods. It became a bestseller, but she never spoke of the real events. Sometimes, at night, she hears a knock. She doesn't answer.